Welcome everyone to the Latin American, Latino, and Caribbean Center. Today we have a very special event, and today we have Dr. Joanne, who is a Puerto Rican associate professor and a licensed clinical social worker, who has been practicing social work in the area of mental health and school social work for over 25 years. She received her bachelor's in social work from Central Connecticut State University, where she is now the department chair. She received her master's in social work from the University of Connecticut, and she received her PhD from Smith College. Dr. Leon's research involves around the following thematic strands: providing culturally sensitive mental health services to Latino populations, the effects of parental incarceration on children and adolescents, as well as supporting students in higher education. In her free time, Dr. Leon enjoys traveling and walking the dog jobs, which I'd love to hear. So without further ado, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for inviting me. I was thinking about, as I was walking here, like what would be important for me to share, especially knowing that I had many pre-social work students attending today. And the other thing I was also talking this morning to Dr. Barada is that I don't like to talk about myself. So it's challenging, even though I do this for a living, talking to people. When it comes to talking about myself, it feels a little vulnerable. So, but then I thought about, this is what I do with my clients every day. They talk to me about their life stories and very difficult hardships, and so it feels a little bit like being in their shoes when I'm talking about myself. So today, I also wanted to think about what will be helpful for the time being that we're going to be here. And I want this to be very informal, so please, I love questions. So if you have questions, interrupt me. I think I would like to start with the fact that my journey to CCSU and how I feel that it's a lot very close to what the clients that I work with, but not necessarily traditional when people think about my trajectory here. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I was raised in Puerto Rico until the age of 14, when I migrated here by myself to live with a cousin. And the idea was just to spend the summer and just to visit the States, visit New York City, and then going back home. But it turned out to be that I decided that I wanted to start in high school here. I was actually born into 9th grade and give it a try for a year. I never went back. So I lived with, like I said, a distant cousin for a year, and then my mom joined me a year and a half later. The adjustment was very difficult. I was so homesick 6 months in. I now recognize, knowing what I know about mental health, that I was probably depressed. 6 months into when the winter started, that's when I was like, okay, I want to go back to my island. But I was already here and going to school, so that was not a possibility. So I pushed through, adjusted as best as I could, met good friends, and my high school sweetheart, who I've been married to for 28 years. And came through EOP, the CCSU. I feel like EOP was that opportunity of someone who had just been here for 4 years to give me that leg up to come into higher education. I met great people here, great support system. This is why it's so important to find mentors and people who are willing to support you, push you through, and see things that sometimes you don't see in yourself. When I was in high school, I had a guidance counselor who I remember I went to talk to about wanting to go to college, right? Because I knew very well, one, I never had anyone in my family who went to college. And I didn't know who to go for help with the paperwork and financial aid. And I remember going to my guidance counselor, and she said to me, I don't think you're going to make it in college. You've only been here for 4 years, and your English is not that great. And I said, thank you very much. And I left her office. And then I found someone else who was able to help me and do what I needed to do for me to apply. So one of the takeaways is for me, and looking back, is do not allow anybody to set your limits or a ceiling on your capacity to succeed. I could have well probably said, you know what, she's probably right? Because I did have some self-doubt. My English was not the greatest. My writing was not at all for what I would say college ready. So I could have easily just said, you know what, she's probably right. I should probably just go work or do something else, right? But I decided to, I knew that the way out of being, and I was raised being, in a family that is what we consider the working poor. And I knew that social mobility was only through higher education. So I decided that I was going to seek somebody else that can see what I saw in myself, which is wanted to go to college. And then I did. I found a teacher. She helped me to fill out, and complete all the paperwork. I got accepted through EOP, and it was the best summer ever. I met a lot of good friends. Decided that I knew what I wanted to major in, and it's been social work from the beginning. I graduated in 4 years. I did very well to the point that I was able to go to advanced standing. So it's 1 year as a master's student. Got a free ride through my MSW, and then became a school social worker in Britain. Actually, before I became a school social worker in Britain, I was a medical social worker for Hartford Hospital when I graduated as a bachelor's from CCSU. I was the first emergency department social worker at Hartford Hospital. So I worked there for 3 years while I got my master's, and then stayed for another 2 years. And then once I got my master's, I decided to try psychiatric side of Hartford Hospital. So I went into the Institute of Living, which is their sister partner for mental health. And I worked there for a few years, but while I was working there, I got a job as a school social worker. So I've always had 2 jobs. I feel like I've always had, I worked when I was a student here. I worked when I was in my master's. So when students say, oh my God, I don't know if I can go to school and go to work, I'm like, if you manage your time well, you absolutely can. And you have to have your priorities in place, right? If you spend a lot of time doing this in social media, I always say, how many hours are you spending, scrolling through things that are not going necessarily, this is great, quick break, 15 minutes or so, but focus on your goals and maximize your time. So then I became a school social worker, and after being a school social worker for, I would say 10 years, I decided to go back to school, and then I got my PhD in social work at Smith College. At that point, it was when I was introduced to the idea of teaching. I never thought about higher education or even teaching in college. And as part of my program, it's required that you teach. So we all taught as a cohort, but I taught a master's level course at Smith College and loved it. Not quite the population that I wanted to work with, but loved the idea of teaching. So when I came back to work, I was a field supervisor for the students in the social work program. So I had interns with me every year. And then the previous chair asked me if I wanted to be an adjunct professor. And I decided, sure, I'll give it a try. And I started teaching here. And then I completed my PhD. And consequently, after like a year later, a position became available at CCSU. I applied. And the rest is history. And so it's really nice to be back to where my journey started and to be part of the program that really propelled me to where my career is today. I love, I still practice. I still do direct psychotherapy with a very small caseload. And then I teach. So I'm very passionate about, not only mental health, but also working with students and first generation students, because I was a first gen student, and knowing that sometimes there's so many roadblocks that they do face. And I always try to be that person that can help them see that there's ways around them and that they can be very successful. So that's in a nutshell my kind of story. But I would like to see if you guys have any questions, things that resonate with you, anything. Okay, your questions, yes, Sydney.
So when you were talking about how when you first came here, like you didn't know like a lot of English and like you were potentially depressed during that time because of that, and I don't know, like it really stuck out to me like when you talked about like the counselor who like was downing because I feel like in society as a whole, there's always people who are like doubting their abilities and like if you really know that like you can do it, then you actually should. And I really like appreciate that you said that. My question for you would be, how would somebody who's like facing that, like who doesn't have like a proper like, support circle, how can they like, not feel like overwhelmed with like that?
So I have, that's a great question. So I was very overwhelmed, right? Because like, where do you start, right? Like, how do you, if you've never done it, it could be very overwhelming. But I remember thinking about, I had this teacher called Mrs. Perez, and I so admire her. She was always put together. She was beautiful Latina, very. She was like that person that I admired. So I went to her and I asked her for after my counselor said that. I went to her and I said to her that this has been my experience, and she validated everything, that I felt about myself. Absolutely not. You're more than capable. Let's come up with a plan. And she kind of structured things for me. Obviously I needed to provide documents. I didn't know that my mom needed to give me tax forms, all these little things that we don't know, right? How to navigate. She really helped me to come up with a list. And then I sat with her after school, and she was able to really support my ideas and my wishes, and never once said anything that was negative or doubtful, and just said, do not listen to that person. Go with your gut feeling. What is it that you want to do with your life? And go out and get it. Don't let anybody set limits for yourself. And that has been, and I have to say that I have encountered people throughout my life, even until now, right? Like, you're going to come across people who are going to say to you, oh, this is not for you, or maybe you should consider something else. But I think it's important to know, where do you see yourself? What is it that you want to do? And then organize your ideas and everything that you do towards that goal. And as long as you put one foot forward every day towards that, nobody else can say, you shouldn't. It's just your idea, your goals, your vision. Push through. People don't know what you know, and you know yourself best. Right?
So I had a question because I'm also an EOP student, and I always see people coming back like this is just you going through like the EOP program. So my question was, what was the program like for you back then? And then did they open any gateways for you to help you get to where you are now?
Absolutely. So back then it was Meg Lee and Charles Jones. They were my two counselors, and Charles Jones originated through GOP. One, it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a lot of fun, even though we had writing and math class. It was the first time that I had an opportunity to stay in a dorm. I never knew what that was like, right? We had field trips, we had activities, and then they also showed me how to structure and manage my time, which I never knew how to do before. I'm assuming you guys still have structured study calls, right? And that was very important for me to know that I had 2 hours that I was going to go in and that I was dedicated to my studies because I worked, and that I had the support that I can go to anytime to speak to any other counselors that I had available. The writing center was my second home. I can't tell you, even through my PhD, I visited the writing center for every paper that I had. So I knew that writing, because, obviously English being my second language, I still struggle with tenses, their little, sentence structure, I find that it's backwards from Spanish, right? So I really have to be mindful that when I used to write, that it's okay for me to go and ask for help. And I had to make the time. I couldn't write my papers the night before. I had to, pretty much do it 2 weeks in advance, 3 weeks in advance, because then you have to submit the paper, they review it, and then rewrite again. So they open a lot of doors in terms of what are the possibilities if you work really hard and you dedicate yourself to the things that you have to do. You got to put in the work. It's not something that is going to come easy, or you can't not do the work and expect to do well. So the accountability was huge.
Yes. When you first came, you were 14. Where did you find your culture? I mean, I don't know if you moved to Hartford or any other suburbs, and how important was to find that little piece of Puerto Rico, whatever it was, food or to sort of create that bridge. At least that happened to me, even though I migrated in my 20s. Find that little home away from home that at least gave me a little bit of what I was missing. I don't know. You found it, and how important was that for you?
So I didn't say that, but you're right. I moved to Hartford and I went to Buckley High School. And Buckley High School had a large population of Latinos, Puerto Rican, Cubans. So I found myself, because I was in bilingual classes, obviously because I didn't speak any English, we had a small cohort of students that were all kind of on the same boat, right? We newly arrivals from Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. And so we found some community just being in these courses together. And we were probably together for the first 2 years. So that's who I really connected with. We share the same stories of being homesick, missing different things, the weather being dreadful. And then we joined clubs in schools that we all kind of moved around as a group. Lunch was as a group. And so it felt like I had my own little community within school. And then every time there was a new arrival, we will be those students that will welcome and kind of show them the ropes. So we kind of connected that way with other students as well. As far as the food, it was difficult because my cousin didn't cook. So I had to learn how to cook and to get some of the things that I missed from home. So that was a challenge, and eating out was never an option. And create out was pizza, right? Nobody goes out and eat Puerto Rican restaurants for dining out. So that was the thing that I missed the most. And it was not until obviously my mom moved here that I had that piece back. So, yeah.
How did you know that straight away it was going to be social work?
So in order for me to answer that, I will have to tell you that how did I know it was social work is because I encountered a social worker in my life. And the reason why I moved here was because my house burned down. And we were homeless. And we found ourselves meeting a social worker who helped us navigate, what happens when you're displaced from your home. And so after staying in a few places that were not the best and felt really unsafe, we went back to my grandparents' home. And because we were, house surfing at their home, my mom that's the only reason why she agreed to let me go and stay with a cousin, because she felt that I needed this space to just, not be cramped up in a home. So that's how I knew who was a social worker. That person helped us a lot. We lost everything. So getting clothing, getting me uniforms so I can get back to school in 2 days, because we wore uniforms. I remember I had a field trip and we were going to a water park and I didn't have a bathing suit. And she got me the bathing suit that I actually lost in the fire. So these are the little things that stay with me, and I realized what she did for a living, and I was like, that's what I want to do. So that's how I realized that. So.
I have another one.
Let's see.
She has a question, then you can go. I think everybody should start that way. Like working in the hospital was well, specifically the emergency department. You have to be flexible. I needed to pivot. Every case, every day was very different, right? Because if you think about the emergency department, different crises come in all the time. It was the best learning experience because it taught me a lot of things that I didn't know. One, that I don't panic under pressure, right? And that's important to, I thought that was the biggest takeaway for me. Two, that I can be calm and professional under a crisis. I was assigned to the trauma team. So if you think about like when Lifestyle goes off, right? We all had a pager and then we would know that they were out and they were coming in with probably a critical client. So I'm that person that while everything is, they're trying to obviously medically attend to that person, I'm going to their belongings. I'm contacting the family. I greet the families. I walk them through the whole process of them being there until they get transferred to another unit. And then I hand them off to that unit social worker. I worked with people who were homeless and will come in, and then I will have to place them. I will work with people who dropped off the elderly loved one and say, I can't take care of this person, and I will have to place them in a nursing skill facility. Substance use disorder people that came in and needed the detox, I will get them a detox facility. If there was someone with a sexual assault, I will sit with them through the whole KIT process and counsel them into a program. So every case, every day was very different. And I thought it was the best experience ever. But I thought that in order for me to be licensed, I needed to do behavioral health. So that's when I decided to move into the behavioral health side of Hartford Hospital. Just because I knew what my path was going to be. And it was like, I want to be a licensed medical social worker. And that was the only way. So, great question.
As a Puerto Rican woman, what were the challenges you found when you went to the hospital, right? Where probably the population was mostly in Hartford, but the management, everybody, right, is predominantly white, and then also in the schools, which that's the case. What lessons you learn of being, a minority, a Latina in a professional setting where everybody else is primarily white, and how did that prepare you maybe for academia down the road?
Well, that was difficult. Probably the biggest challenge was realizing the disparities of the community that looked like me and, that were Latinos like me coming in, and how different they were treated because they didn't speak English, because they didn't have health insurance, assumptions that were made about people in general, microaggressions, right? Even from my own colleagues. Sometimes undermining what I knew how to do best, but because they were doctors or directors, that they thought they can do what my role was, or know better in terms of how to deal with families. I remember that one of the things that I think I had a hard time was that they were intimidated. The fact that many Latino clients will come in, what I used to say, with 10, 5, 6 people arrive at the hospital and they will be upset that why so many people are here. We only allow one person, and they wouldn't understand how familismo plays a big role, especially in a crisis or, or with anyone who is injured in any capacity. So, and I felt like I was constantly educating people, and it was just to no avail. The same people will say the same things, same negative assumptions were made. So I had to be that person that would have to then apologize to clients for things that either were said or how they were treated, and a lot of times really be really upset with the system, right? But I know that my role, at least I can make it as best as possible while I was working with the family. And just in general, ignorance, right, that people had about just people from other backgrounds, and not thinking that having that support, it's key for people to do well and get better soon. But they saw it as being intimidating, right, that all these people were there. When the doctor came in to talk to them, that I don't want to talk to 6 people. I just want to talk to that one person, either the spouse or or their children or something. But, I was like, no, they all want to hear what you have to say so they can support that family member. So it was a very difficult transition. And you have to do it while you were really remaining professional.
You felt the same in schools, or was it a bit different when you transitioned to school?
I think every system has this, internalized racism, the way they serve kids in schools. There's obviously a lack of resources. I worked in Britain. And I think they have come a very long way from when I started. I think I used to remember when kids that came in from other countries, how they were isolated and they were treated as they need to be in this class and put them all together and they can't be part of, because they don't understand or they shouldn't participate. And of course, that has shifted a lot. But, and how little support they would get, right? They would just be, or depending on the school, because I moved into a lot of school, they would be in a classroom where no one spoke their language and they would just sit there. So the resources sometimes were not there. Assumptions are always made about parents, especially working parents who couldn't come into conferences or pick up the children every time they will call because they were sick and they have no car, they can't get here, and people will make assumptions about their parenting. So I was constantly pushing back and educating people to be more sensitive and understanding that, it's easy for me to say, I need to leave, I need coverage because my job provides me those benefits and I have sick time, I have a car, I get, I don't have the worry of losing my job because I have to leave right now to go pick up my sick child. So, yeah, I think you see that everywhere. But they have come a long way because they understand. They're more trauma informed, especially in Britain. They've done a lot of work with becoming more trauma informed, and they're obviously been doing this for much longer and know the population better, and are very invested in serving all students now. So, anybody else?
Nobody has any more questions. I just like to say once again, thank you for being here. It's very insightful what you said, and I'm pretty sure everyone here can take something very important from what you mentioned, whether it was from learning to adapt to a new experience or even after that. Mm-hmm. So thank you, and
thank you.
I hope we can hear from you then.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see you guys if you have not applied for the semester, next semester. Come into the majors. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you can eat the burgers?
Yeah, because somebody else will,